Okay, well, first of all, I want to welcome everybody to what I believe to be probably the first ever online meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So this one might go a little more difficult than they usually are, but we'll get through it. And I'd like to welcome the Schroeders to our meeting. Thank you for coming or attending.
Thank you.
All right, first of all, now I'm going to be looking down from time to time, so I got a bunch of notes, so please forgive that. First of all, I'd like to start call the meeting to order officially. We'll begin with the roll call. Bill Murphy, present.
Jim Holloway, present.
Okay, so we have myself, Tom Weaver, Jim Hollowell, and who else? That's it, 3 of us, right? Okay. All right. First of all, the reason for our meeting today is we've received an application for a variance from the rear yard setback requirements in zoning code 3.2.G.1.c for a proposed single family detached home to be located on lot 198B on Madison Avenue. Tammy, do we have any other than the applicants, do we have anyone who wanted to speak or any comments from the public that were sent in?
I do not, and as of right now, we don't have any comments.
Okay, all right, having heard none, I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing portion of this.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, I'll second it. All in favor, either say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, all right, the public meeting hearing portion is closed. Moving on. Okay, Tracy, now normally we do the Pledge of Allegiance here, and of course I realize we're not all together, but just to kind of keep in line with things as much as we can, I'd like for everyone, wherever you are, just to pretend there's a flag right in front of you, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
the United States
of America
and to the
republic
for which it stands,
One nation,
God,
under God,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you all very much. Now, I think moving on here, we don't have, Tracy, do we have any comments regarding the agenda or anything like that we need to address first?
We do not.
All right, having heard none, then I would entertain a motion to consent the approval of today's agenda.
I make a motion to the consent of the agenda for the Board of Zoning Appeals 16 June.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay.
Aye.
All right, motion approved for the agenda. Okay, next thing normally would be the minutes. Tracy, I guess we don't have the minutes for this meeting, right? Or we don't for last meeting?
No, this is a special meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So the only item on the agenda is the variance application.
Okay, good. Yeah, I thought so. I just thought I'd mention that to be sure. Okay. All right. So that moves us to the order of business for the special meeting. The only item on there, as I've said, is the application for a variance for a rear yard setback, lot 198B Madison Avenue. And of course, we'll have comments on that. But before we go any further, Jeb, I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Okay, looking at the plat map, let me get it here in front of me. From the county and what was in the package, it looks like that particular corner there of Strawberry and Madison, there actually are what appears to be 4 non-conforming lots in that little corner there. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So, and it's clear that the applicant's home is proposed to be built right on the corner of Madison and Strawberry. So once that house is built, looking at the lot behind it and the 2 other lots that would be to the left of it, it would seem to me like if a house was built on the lot behind theirs, it would have to face Strawberry. Is that correct?
I'm pulling up right now, but yes, sir. Yes, sir. It would have to face Strawberry.
Mm-hmm. And if they built next to it, of course, it would face Madison. But it would appear to me that in either case, if someone builds another lot there, it would have to either the one interior lot would be blocked off and never usable for anything, or someone would have to build on 2 lots. Did you?
Yeah, so the 2 lots to the north behind where they're proposing to build at this time are owned by the same person.
Okay.
I suspect they would keep those together, and if they ever built, they would have to vacate that property line.
Okay, good.
Because it's not buildable as it sits.
Okay, good. So whatever would be built there, either on that lot or whatever, the setback requirements on that house would be for the side yard. It wouldn't be a 25-foot.
No. It would be a side yard because they'd have to build to face Strawberry.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to clear that up. That may not mean anything to anybody else, but that kind of had me confused a little bit. Okay. The first thing, and I always try to read this every time, and mainly for the applicants, the thing that we have to have in order to even entertain a motion to grant a variance, per the zoning ordinance, it has to meet 3 requirements. The first one is that the strict application of the ordinance would procure undue hardship. The second, that such hardship is not shared generally by other properties in the same zoning district and the same vicinity. And the third one, that the authorization of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property, and that the character of the district will not be changed by the granting of the variance. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I think, is take each one of these one at a time, and I'd like to get comments from everybody on it. Keeping in mind that this lot is approximately 40 by 87, which makes it a non-conforming lot. Conforming lot would be 40 by, it's 140, I think, right? Is that, yeah.
Well, it's
So
got to
this
be
is-
a minimum of 5,600 square feet. So
Okay,
there's other ways to
5,600,
make
right.
that.
Right. So this is definitely a non-conforming lot.
Yes, sir.
All right. The first one that we need to consider is would imposing. Well, first of all, has everybody read what the applicants want to build and why it requires a variance? Is everyone familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. Tom, are you familiar?
Yes, I am.
Okay. The thing to keep in mind here is that it's considered, the screened-in porch is considered a part of the structure, which means that it has to meet the 25-foot variance. Now, a deck, excuse me, or up to 16 inches in height would not be considered, per the ordinance, would not be considered part of the structure, and it could encroach in the rear setback. So that's something we need to keep in mind. Now, so the question becomes, and Tom, we can start with you if you want, is looking at the plans for the house and the size of the lot, do we think that an imposition of this would procure an undue hardship, or do we feel like there's other things that could happen, such as a deck, that would not require a variance?
Well, let me just comment. I want to go back to, if you allow me just for a second, give a little bit of history on the procurement of this property. Was where the owners, the current owners, Mr. Schroeder, aware of the setback requirements when you were looking at this lot? Was this a big surprise to you when all of a sudden you discovered that there was more of a setback requirement than you were able to accommodate?
We were aware of the envelope, the building envelope. We weren't aware that a deck would be encroaching on that our porch. Because it was covered, we realized that that was part of the house and all that. But the back porch is something that we really is one of the key features for me, and so that's why we're asking for another 7 feet.
We had planned on a small house anyway, so the fact that the building envelope was relatively small didn't bother us.
Okay. I'm thinking again, and I know this has come up before, that you look around at other properties, you see where there's building that has taken place that is certainly closer than a 25-foot setback.
Multiple houses.
Yeah, and I appreciate your position, really, and desire to have this porch. However, you've got a front porch as well on this house. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Have you given any consideration to a redesign of this house so that you can actually move if the back porch, the screen-in porches are so much important to you that you would be able to give up one versus the other and then accommodate the setback?
I don't believe if we remove the front porch, now we're just going to have some steps coming out of the house.
And I think the historic board wants a porch on the front.
Okay.
So we're kind of stuck between that.
I don't have any other questions, Bill.
Okay, I see Pete's joined us now. Pete, do you have any thoughts about whether or not this meets the first requirement that it would produce undue hardship? Is Pete there?
It doesn't look like he's activated his microphone yet.
Okay, all right, Jim, what do you think?
I'm sort of along the same line as Tom. I know that we had seen a previous variance where we had requested that could the homeowners, because this is going to be a new construction, to actually do a slight redesign of the home since it's not built yet, to then accommodate both the front porch and the back. It seems like that might be the best approach if we're going to try and do something going forward. Otherwise, I think the porch on the back is going to have to be shorter to stay within the guidelines.
Okay. My take on it is sort of like this. If you look at the lot, and I did look at it several times in the adjoining lots, when you think about the fact that what would be behind them, would it be another house that would face their back of that house would face the back of the Schroeder's house? And no, it would face Strawberry. So the house that could potentially be built behind them would only require a 5-foot setback. So for them to be 7 feet into a 25-foot clearance, that's still a lot of space between the lot behind them and what they want to build and how they want to build it. And I sort of look at it like this, that if it's a non-conforming lot, first of all, which gives us a little bit, I think, more leeway in the interpretation of the ordinance. If it was a conforming lot, I think it makes it a little more cut and dry. But if you look at the overall, and we'll cover this in the other two, to me, I think given the size of the lot and what potentially might be behind it or to the left of it, I'm not so sure that it's not an undue hardship to expect them to give up the porch, because that is an important part of the plan. If you read the application and their statements, it appears that they're considering that a pretty vital part of the home. Now, the question then becomes to me is, okay, and we talked about giving up the front porch, is redesigning the house, reducing the square footage, looking at the cost involved to do that, and what we're asking them to do, is that counterbalanced by giving a little bit on the rear setback. And so, of course, we always come back to the same thing, and we've had these cases many times before. Do we look at the ordinance and say it either is or isn't black and white and hold to that, or do we try to factor in the potential for that area for development, what's already there and what's historically been there? Because Cape Charles basically is a mess zoning wise, and there's nothing that we're ever going to be able to do about that other than try to make it better going forward. So I think right now, in my mind, I tend to give them the lean that it is an undue hardship, but we'll go on through everybody's thoughts and come to a conclusion. But is Pete there yet? Or I know he's still muted. Pete, can you hear us? Yes, sir, Mr. Schroeder.
Would I be able to add a little something?
Sure, certainly, anytime. Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot we didn't put into our introductory letter. I spent a lot of, first of all, my wife and I officially want to thank you guys for taking the time to do this special meeting. We've been coming to Cape Charles since 2014 when our sister, Linda's sister,
Nice.
Lisa, and Chip built a house in Bay Creek, Chip Moore. We fell in love with your town, and the restaurants, the beach, everything was tremendous, and we decided this is where we want to spend our retirement. Linda will be within walking distance of her sister, and I'd be a happy guy. We decided to purchase the lot in 2017, and we knew it was a non-conforming lot. But we didn't mind because we wanted a small house. We're retiring here. I've been spending 39 years in the electrical business up here in Philadelphia as a union electrician, and my knees have developed osteoarthritis pretty severely. The last 6 years, I've been taking shots to try to alleviate that pain. And the final year of work, I had to wear knee braces to try to get through the day. I retired early, and then I just recently received Social Security disability on February 1st. So we designed this house with first floor living in mind. It's only about 1,100 square feet, and it suited us. But the back porch was kind of a surprise to us when we found out that that would be part of the house.
What do you mean?
As far as the part of the structure of the house, and that it went past the envelope. So that's why it's essential for us, not essential, but it's going to be very difficult for us to shrink the size of this house to accommodate that, because it's already a small. I mean, our bedroom's small, and so I just wanted to get that point across to the board.
Good, thank you. Anyone have anything else to add at this time before we go on to criteria number 2? Okay. All right. If not, the second criteria says that before we can grant it, the authorization of such variance, the second one is that such hardship is not shared generally by other properties in the same zoning district in the same vicinity. Now, I think that the hardship of being a non-conforming lot is not shared by other lots in the same vicinity. It's certainly not shared by the ones to the left of it going down the street. I looked at all that. So I think they're in kind of a unique position, particularly being in that corner there where they are. I don't think other lots or other houses do share that hardship. I think criteria 2 in my mind is met. If we do find that it's an undue hardship, which we're still discussing, then that hardship would not generally be shared by other properties in the same district. Now, again, it could be avoided by reducing the house in size, and that would meet the minimum, still meet the minimum square footage of 960. But again, that's a major redesign and a major rethinking of what the applicants are proposing to put there. So in my mind, I think criteria 2, the answer is yes to that. Tom? Tom, you're muted.
Apologize for that. I agree with you, Bill. I don't have any further comments.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I would agree with you too, Bill. It sounds like, based on what is surrounding, that it would be in keeping with the surrounding area. That's definitely a big play into this, I think. Based on what the applicant was saying, then the question becomes, and I guess we can't really address future things, but if you're going to build a porch, and if you're going to have a disability, for instance, is a ramp then going to be required, which then would go further out? That would be my only biggest concern, I would think, But that's all that I was thinking about.
I have recently had a full knee replacement on my right knee in February, and I'm planning to get another full knee replacement in my left knee in the fall. So the ramp would only come into play if something disastrously wrong goes with the surgery.
Which we
Okay.
hope not.
Mhm.
And the screened-in porch would be level with the bedroom and the small deck we have proposed to come off the back of the house for a grilling area off the kitchen. So they would all be on the same level. Once he gets into the house, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Okay. Pete, we still no communication with Pete, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Bill, he can evidently hear, he just can't talk back. He can hear everything that's being said.
Oh, okay. Well, Pete, if you can, since you can hear us, can you raise your hand there or stick your hand in the camera? No. Okay, well, as long as Pete can hear us. Jeb, do you have any comments to this point so far? I didn't mean to exclude you.
No, you're fine. I mean, I'm just entertaining any questions. I mean, I agree with the second one that it's not generally shared by others. I mean, the first one, I think to me was the sticking point that, that the undue hardship, because the structure is not built yet, they could redesign to meet the current setbacks. So in my opinion, I mean, that's the one that I would have the toughest time trying to find a way around that one.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, then let's go ahead to number 3, and then we'll come back and sort of combine everything. Okay, the third criteria states that the authorization of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property, and that the character of the district will not be changed by the granting of the variance. I see that as pretty straightforward. The answer to that, I think, is that no, the character of the district would not be changed. There's many houses in that area that are closer than 25 feet from the line. I don't really think it would produce a detriment to any of the adjoining properties. I suppose you could make a case that it might, but since there's nothing there and nothing planned that I'm aware of there, and the other house would face Strawberry anyway, I don't see where it would be a real detriment. So I think that one is met. But anyway, Tom? You're muted.
Apologize for that again. I agree with your comments, Bill. The one thing that concerns me is the precedent setting issues. This is a non-conforming lot, which also is another dimension to this particular issue that we haven't, or at least I haven't had experience with before. The one that you and I were associated with before was a standard lot, and it was brought up that, you look across the street and you see houses that are much closer together. Why can't we do this and why can't we do that? I think this, because it is a non-conforming lot and because I don't really believe it's going to be detrimental, especially since it faces Madison as opposed to facing Strawberry, that I just don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Jim?
I would agree with both you, Bill and Tom. I think it's not going to be a problem for condition 3.
Okay. All right. Pete, since you can hear all of this, if you agree, sort of hold your hand up to the camera there, or if you disagree, kind of let us know somehow.
I think his camera is pointing at his desk.
I think so too. Yeah, thank you. Pete, can you turn your camera around? I think that might help.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
I'm trying to get him on my speakerphone. He evidently does have stuff to say. So
okay.
let me try and figure this out a second here.
Okay, fine. Thank you. We'll hold on.
Trying to get my phone over here and hopefully we can make all this work.
Well, I can see him now.
Hey, Pete, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, that's good. All right. Hey, Pete, go ahead and turn your iPad off or whatever you're on.
I'm on a personal computer.
All right, in your session. Let me see if that helps with the feedback.
How's that?
Okay, much better. All right, go ahead and talk, and let's see if everybody can hear you.
Good old fashioned telephone. Hello?
Yes. Hey, Pete.
Hi.
Hey,
I'm
Pete.
sorry, I'm beyond technically retarded.
So are we.
So, I've read everything and I've watched this almost from the beginning, but certainly through all of the arguments. And, as you know, I'm not one for opinions. I just feel that the hardship for me is the fact that due to the size of this lot, which is, a little more than half the normal size, as far as, depth goes of 140 and it's 87, I think. You're looking at a situation where when you take off the front setback and the back setback, they've got less than half of their lot, which fits in the envelope. And so, if you take 45 feet from 47, that's more than half is being taken away. So I feel that if you were then to reduce the setbacks, let's say by half, and this is actually, they're losing more than half, then it would come down to 12.5 on one and 10 on the other. That would just be keeping everything in line with the overall number scheme. So, I would say it's an undue hardship. I also, it's they can put a porch, but there's a huge difference between a porch or a deck and a screened-in area. Huge. And I see it as a hardship. They didn't create it. These two lots are just there, side by side. That are I imagine are both the same size. So I'm seeing hardship that it's not shared, and that the main one I would have been concerned about was whether it created a detriment to another property, but it would be like almost more theoretical than real. So those are my thoughts on the three criteria.
Okay.
I think they meet all three.
Okay. Thank you, Pete. All right. Well, since we've had a general discussion on all three criteria, let's kind of begin sort of a wrap up. Tom, your final thoughts on things?
Well, actually, I appreciate the last comments. I hadn't even thought of it quite that way, in the sense that proportionately the encroachment on the setback is less than it would be if you apportioned that space. It's still by definition, if you go by the zoning, it's still by definition non-compliant. I don't have a problem with number 3. I think number 1 was where I really had difficulty in talking with the builder to see if anything could be done to modify that plan. Understanding, of course, that it would probably involve some money, but beyond that, that's really my comment.
Okay. Jim?
I guess my biggest thing is since we're not talking about a variance to build something onto an existing structure, that it seems like now would be the time to actually rework the plans. Sometimes you can take 2 feet here, 1.5 feet here, whatever, and you can make it work and stay within the conformity. And that way, we're doing our due diligence to try and keep things within the zoning and code. So that's sort of my thoughts on it.
Okay. I guess sort of my final thoughts are that it seems to me that the one issue that we have a difference of opinion on is the first criteria. Would it procure or produce an undue hardship? And I guess I look at that like this, and we've had this discussion, like I said, many times before. The criteria we have to meet, if we're not going to try very hard to meet those, they might as well not exist. And they do, and we've had to make some hard calls because of that, as you all know. Now, the only thing I would say to add to that is that I think the one place or one area that might give us a little room to lean one way or another would be the fact that this is a non-conforming lot, which means, as Pete very well put it, that their building envelope is reduced quite a bit. Jeb, does that make some sense to you, that the fact that it's a non-conforming lot might have something to do with the issue of hardship?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, like I say, number one really was the one that held me up. And I can see it both ways. One comment I will make here, I'm looking at their survey, and I guess I should have checked on this before, but so in built up neighborhoods, your prevailing setback in the front is what takes precedent, not the 30 feet. Do you know, Jeff and Linda, do you know if that was taken into account when your surveyor placed this on the site plan?
Well, when it was originally surveyed back in 2017, the front and rear setbacks were switched.
Okay.
I don't know if you noticed that. That was
There's a document we sent you.
I mean, what I'm looking at right now, it doesn't have, I can't read the front and back measurements. I mean, so what the zoning ordinance says is that it has to be 30 feet on the front, unless it's in a built up neighborhood where there's a prevailing standard that takes place.
we never heard the number 30.
What did you hear?
20 on the front and 25 on the back. And
No.
it
All right, so 20 could be the number that's already in a prevailing standard that's already set in the neighborhood.
because we were supposed to line up with all the other houses.
5 in the paperwork.
Okay.
I
So
never saw 30 either.
okay, so 30 is what the zoning ordinance says. Like if you were on a lot on a block where there was no other houses. So take the 200 block of Washington Avenue. When the first house was built there, it had to meet the 30-foot setback, and then every house lines up from that. But it also gives into account where there's houses that that were existing prior to the zoning ordinance that they wanted. The intent was that they wanted all the houses to kind of line up. So there's a prevailing setback. So so the 20 feet is the prevailing. So you're taking into account for that. Okay, that's all I have to say.
So now, listening to all that, does any of that have a potential impact onto the fact that the rear setback would be encroached more or less, or does it just?
It doesn't sound like it if they're already planning on the 20 feet.
Okay, all right, that's good. I'd like to get a few kind of final comments from the Schroeders. I know what you want to do and everything. Having heard all this discussion, does anything come to mind with you folks that something that you might be able to do that would not require variance, or I mean, just honestly tell us how you feel about it, because that's a big factor.
I feel like we're not asking for a lot. I mean, we're only asking for a couple of feet. And looking at the surveys of the other lots up and down Madison, there's only 2 lots like ours on the whole street. The 2 lots behind us are not equal size to the ones that we have. They're about 40 by 45 feet, as opposed to ours were 40 by 87. There's much smaller lots. I just feel like we're at a disadvantage, because if someone does build a house, like you said, on Strawberry, they only have to be 5 feet away from our property. We'll still be 18, 19 some feet away from theirs. So we're not really encroaching on anyone. I feel like our house is small as it is, and to shrink it, to redesign it, we've been working with Bill Dowdy of Village Builders for about 3 years, trying to get everything right until I could pull the trigger on this. And so we're very excited about the opportunity, but we're also very nervous about this process.
He had one request when we started designing this house, which I did mostly myself based on the building envelope and Pinterest. He had one request, and it was a screened-in porch. He didn't care what else I did in that house. All he wanted was a screened-in porch. I could have put a dog shower in, but he just wanted a screened-in porch. And we're living in a small house now, and to make the house we go to smaller is just sad for us. And
the second floor that we have, the 2 bedrooms up there, that's strictly for when our daughters come down or when family or friends come down. We're not renting this property out. We're going to die in this house. Well, hopefully not soon, but.
Jeff always says happy wife, happy life, but he's a hard worker and he's wrecked his body for lots of years. And I just want him to be comfortable and happy and to get this one small thing that he wants. And I hope you guys see our thought process.
Okay. Thank you, folks. Really, I just got one thing to add. I'm sorry, who was that?
It's Pete. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
If I may, I just wanted to say that they've really got a small building envelope already. I think that that was one of the more heartfelt presentations I've ever heard. I'm sorry. And then the third thing is that, just to simply say that it doesn't meet the requirements of the ordinance, well, we know that, and that's why we have variances. So, that's it. I'm just, I think they've got a hardship here that the house directly behind them isn't really going to be affected at all, as they just stated. It's not as though the porch is going to be up against the property line. It's going to be far from it. And here, where I live on Monroe, I can watch my neighbor wash his dishes, so I think that in this case, it's an undue hardship, and they certainly didn't create it. As Bill has said a few times, we have all these crazy size non-conforming lots in town. And so I'm a pretty strong vote in favor of the applicants.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom, or Pete, I'm sorry. I think with me, the sticking point and I usually read these things several times and then go look at the property and read them again. But the very first thing that I thought about was that criteria number 1 was, in my mind, about the only sticking point. And after I looked at the surrounding lots a little more, and I realized that any potential dwelling behind them would face Strawberry, I thought the same thing that Pete did, that, they'll be within 5 feet if they so chose of their property line, and they're going to have about 18 feet still left before they would be to their property line with their house. So, and it's a non-conforming lot. So here's the thing with me. I really do believe that if possible, we should always maintain those 3 criteria. And we've done that before. And it's like Tom was saying, we required someone to somewhat redesign or relocate their house, and they were very upset about having to do it, but they did it, and it's been built now, and it looks fine. I'm sure Tom remembers that. But I do think somewhere, and this goes along with what Pete said, we have to take into account a little bit of discretionary leeway that we have here to be a little more liberal with the 3 criteria, not to throw them away, not to ignore them. And if it didn't meet any of them, then there's no question. But when there's 2 that we are all pretty much in agreement on, and one of them you could make an argument either way, generally speaking, and particularly in this case, I would favor going along with the applicant, because I just don't see where it's going to do any harm or hamper the town or the neighborhood. I don't think there's any harm to anybody. It's already a small enough place. And I think in this particular case, with me anyway, I think I see enough gray area to give them the lean. Because if we're not going to occasionally be empowered and come up through by way of a good discussion, have some leeway to be a little bit lenient with some of these things, then really you don't even need a Board of Zoning Appeals. You just say, does it meet the 3 criteria? And the zoning administrator says, no, it doesn't. Do something else. So I think that's part of why we're here, is to consider the human element when and where we can. So I mean, I could talk on and on. I'm just going to stop. But I think in my mind, I think there's enough, there are enough mitigating factors here to approve the request. But once again, it's a board, and I'm going to ask one more time how people feel, pro or con, and then I'll ask for a motion. Okay, Tom?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I came in here initially and I had gone down and looked at the property and I'd read these documents, and I was not set in my ways to the extent that I was not going to vote in favor of this. What Pete said sort of made me begin to start looking at this more from a humane standpoint. I look at the lots now that are empty, and I'm thinking, if we apply really hard criteria to this, what is the probability of somebody else coming back there and building a house on this lot? I think, from my perspective, that it enhances the town of Cape Charles and also that piece of property to have a nice home there. And I think I know which house it is. It looks almost identical to Diane and Phil, the Amico's house, I believe. So my personal opinion is that I'm in favor of it, of granting the variance.
All right, thank you, Tom. Jim, your final thoughts?
Actually, I appreciate everyone's thoughts and comments. I'm actually, I'm in favor of us passing this.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. I think in closing, before we have a motion and a vote, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone's flexibility and the discussions that we have, and how we kind of look at things from one side and the other and bat it back and forth, because I mean, that's called compromise. And we don't have enough of that, frankly, these days. So I feel good about it. I do think that we're doing our job, and at the same time, like Tom said, taking in the humane aspect of things and trying to be reasonable. So with that said, and unless someone else has any other comments or objections, I would like to propose a motion that we approve the variance as requested.
Bill, I'd like to propose a motion that we approve this variance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor, either say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 That's unanimous, Tracy. So I would say that the variance is approved. Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Happy New Year.
Thank you all.
Thank you
all.
so much.
And Jeb,
you're very welcome.
Jeb, I'll probably be buying a couple more Yetis off you.
Okay.
Okay, sounds
Right.
good.
Does anyone else have any closing comments, or is there anything else we need to discuss before we close the meeting?
Just that I can't wait to come down and meet you guys and say thank you and buy you a beer.
Good. Well, we look forward to having you folks as neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just reiterate the same thing and saying we look forward to having you down here as permanent residents, those of us who are permanent.
We can't wait.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. At this time, with no further, before we go, Jeb, after we're all wrapped up here, I do have a quick question for you on another subject, if you have a minute.
Okay. You just want to call my office phone?
No, well, in fact, I'll just ask you real quick. The town ordinance for requiring a sidewalk, that's applicable to, that's also applies to Bay Creek. Is that correct?
Yeah, we could talk offline. There's some other requirements in the PUD documents that talk about that.
Oh, okay. I'll call you some other time and discuss that then. So it's,
Yep.
it's not a yes or no answer. Okay, thank you. All right, with no other business to discuss, could we get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn the Board of Zoning Appeals.
All right, I think that was Jim. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye.